over and over as we go. So welcome everybody. This is Data Fire Academy's Data Story Lab, and it's nice to have all of us. This is like our 8th edition when we started since December last year. And for me, it's beyond 8. What we do every time monthly is to see how we can help to resource the ecosystem, media ecosystem, institutional, academic, NGOs, CSOs, governments, and the likes, with some trainings around data, around reporting, around analysis, around research. And I think we've even taken it a step further to see digital tools, right? Even try to incorporate technological tools, AI tools in the part of our work that we do daily, right? So thank you so much for joining in. We are trying as much as possible to sort out the registration link that is happening, but I see we already have one of our speakers, Karim Mojid, from Premium Times, who is already here. So we're just going to start up. So what we're going to be doing this time is just in respect to the upcoming COP meeting, that's the Conference of Parties meeting that brings together several countries to agree on in unilateral decisions around climate change and how they tend to mitigate and reduce greenhouse gas emission. How do journalists and practitioners who in a way could be faced with the challenge of reporting it, how do they report these negotiations, right? So we're supposed to start off with Vivian Chime. She's still trying to join in. I think she's having a registration issue. But we'll just kick off with Abdul Karim so that we don't keep everybody waiting, and while we try to sort out when she joins. So Abdul Karim, if you're here, you can just probably unmute. Let me confirm while I still give a short introduction to what we are doing today. Okay, very good, sir. So basically, like I said, one of the things that we're going to be looking at is to understand, I mean, as much as we're going to dig deep into understanding climate change, understanding the aspect of negotiations, the two things that, I mean, for those who don't know COP, for instance, the two things is how you can report those negotiations, especially from a country's perspective, what to look out for, right? I know between now and October, this year's one is COP 30, right? Which will be happening, I think, the second week of November in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, right? Ongoing right now, I'm not sure it's concluded, is also the UN general meetings. And I've seen, if you're following the conversation, climate change also has been a very integral part of the conversation. So we just brought two experienced journalists who has been there over time to cover it, especially, let's say, from a Nigerian perspective. What are the things we're looking at for? Because beyond the fact that there are negotiations going side and side, there are also activities like cultural activities, celebration activities, and the likes, right? So you could get lost in any of those things. So we see if we can tap into their experience and they can share those experiences with us. So I would yield and welcome Abdul Karim to take over from me while I try to present a slide. Okay, sir. So if you can see my screen, you can just go ahead.
Hi, Kenny.
Yes, sir. Good day, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, great. Um, Thank you so much for having me. It's a great privilege to be here to talk about something I think I also dear and that I'm passionate about, climate change. My name is Abdulkarim Majid, like you said. I'm a business and environment reporter at Premium Times newspaper. So, um, I've been invited to speak on um, how journalists who are interested in covering, the UN Climate Change Conference, COP, popularly known as COP, and um, on some of the tips, the practical steps they can follow to achieve, seamless coverage and also be able to cover the event effectively and efficiently. Um, the ultimate goal of reporting is to be able to inform your audience and not misinform them. But looking at the technicality involved around the whole, climate change conversation and all of that, one can easily get lost when you um get the opportunity to cover the conference at the global level. Of course, just to set the ball rolling, I think I started covering COP in 2022. That was the 27th edition COP, and it was hosted by Egypt, and I think at Sharm el Sheikh. And then that was my first experience of covering COP at this level. And right then, I I feel it is important for journalists to so they won't make the same mistake that I made during the trip. Um, to be able to arm themselves with the right tool, knowledge, the technical know-how on how to follow through on this conversation. And I'm happy to see that Vivian, whom I believe has also covered COP for quite a number of time, will be joining the call. So please don't just see me as the expert here. Just a little point to note. I will try my best to share what I know about it. I'm also looking forward to learning from each and every one of you on the call. Um, so from Egypt, I was also privileged to cover the next COP, which was COP 28 in Dubai. Likewise, I was also able to cover the next COP. That was last year's COP in Azerbaijan, Baku. This year's COP will be holding in Egypt, in Belém, I think from the 10th to 21st of November this year. And Belém is getting ready to welcome people, to welcome folks, to welcome, officials across at least, I think, 196 countries in the world. I know in Dubai, over 70,000 people um, registered and attended COP in Dubai at the Expo City 2020 in Dubai. Um, I know over 35,000 attended that of um, Baku. You can see, imagine being in the midst of such crowd, what it would look like. Same people from all over the world, from different continents, convening, converging, just to champion conversation on how to address the burning issue of climate change. You know, um, please next slide. Let's just start the conversation from there. I thought it's important for me to let you have that at the back of your mind. So as COP is coming up um in less than I think 2 months, many journalists, I'm sure, are getting ready to say, oh, we want to cover COP, we want to go to COP. Although there are several challenges that especially we journalists from the Global South face in covering this, from whether the necessary equipment, the right guidance, and all of that. Please, if you can't hear me, just let me know. And also, if you have anything you want to ask, please kindly feel free to interrupt as the conversation, evolves. Uh, so what I will just be sharing here basically is just practical tips for journalists from the Global South. We are from Nigeria, and so before the conference, there are certain things that journalists must take note of. Excuse me. Before heading to COP. For me, what I normally do before attending COP meetings is that I would like to inform our audience that, oh, look, this is happening, and this is the aim and objective of this conversation that will be happening, and the goal, what people should expect from the meeting. And of course, people who are attending COP, they are going there to pursue their different agenda. And so you are expecting people to be reacting in different ways, from different reactions based on the realities from their countries that they are coming from. For me, reporting for Premium Times, my focus is usually Nigeria first. Then I consider West Africa, and then Africa as a whole. That's just my target. So I don't get overwhelmed. So before the conference, yeah. So before the conference, it's important that you get yourself prepared. Because of course, if you're not prepared, you're bound to fail in delivering on some key aspects, on some key conversation that will be happening at COP. I encourage journalists who are looking forward towards attending COP this year to apply for media accreditation early. So the UNFCCC Press Office, that is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Office. You can go online, you see the link for journalists to get themselves registered. I don't advise journalists to get accreditation from NGOs, CSOs, because they will only get accreditation that bears the badge observers. And that will limit you in some ways of how to, as journalists, you need access for you to get into some of the conference rooms, to listen to some of the conversation that will be happening. But with some badges, you can actually be restricted. But when you carry the badge of press, you have access, seamless access to some of these rooms, and you are able to engage. So the next thing is that you apply for the accreditation early. So you get approved from that accreditation. When it is approved, you can easily apply for your visa. You can also, because of how expensive traveling is, especially traveling international, this year's COP will be happening in Belém. You'll be traveling to Brazil. So it can be very expensive. And many journalists in the Global South they don't have the financial muscle to cover the cost of traveling, feeding, accommodation, and the likes. So I encourage journalists to apply for, to seek fellowships. There are organizations who are willing to support credible journalists who have history of reporting climate change. In fact, in some cases, they want journalists who don't necessarily have experience, that much around the climate change issues, because it's also a learning process for them. Just like in my case in 2022, when I traveled to Egypt, it was my first time, covering COP, even though I had reported extensively around climate change issues back home in Nigeria. But it was a thing of excitement for me to now go to report COP at the highest level of, climate change conversation, which I feel every journalist like myself um, is likely going to feel the same way. So you seek for fellowships. When you have proper funding, your mind is rest assured of, traveling without any hitch, without being afraid of, or why you are even covering the conference, what you are going to eat, where you are going to stay when you arrive, and the likes. Next slide, please. Are you there? Can you hear me? Oh, great. So continuation, we set the agenda of every COP meetings. So this year's COP will be the 30th edition of the conversation since it started. I know the agenda will be to see how governments, countries are likely going to scale up climate change action, climate change adaptation, mitigation, and even financing of climate change issues in their respective countries. So just to be clear, in the climate change conversation, we have parties, that is countries, who are signatory to the Paris Agreement under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The agreement is that we should come together to see how to limit emission so as to keep temperature level, the global temperature level below 1.5 degrees Celsius. That is the target. And to do this, it is expected that countries are supposed to follow the path of green growth and development, where in order to cut down on emissions, that is the discharges of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which is impacting the planet, biodiversity, and the likes. And as countries who are signatory to this, they are expected to submit a document they call the Nationally Determined Contribution Document. And that document, it's a document that communicates countries' pledges, what they intend to do in order to keep emission, to reduce emission in their respective countries. So based on that, every year's COP has agenda. This year's COP is to see how can countries fulfill what they have communicated in their NDCs. I think on the 22nd, just last week, within the week, Nigeria submitted its updated NDC. I urge you all to read it and get used to what is Nigeria proposing? What are they saying they will do this time around in order to reduce emission? That is the only way, as journalists, we can hold government accountable. We can hold relevant individuals accountable based on the pledges that we have made, that we have committed ourselves to. So you research on the agenda of every COP, the key negotiations. As we go on, you get to know some of the core negotiations that will be happening at COP under different thematic area. And the national delegation, know your country's national delegation, who will be leading delegation to stay, it's a negotiation. There are people who will be leading Nigeria's delegation to COP. In our own case, we have the UNFCCC, that is the Nigerian Climate Change Council, because they are the focal point. The DG is the focal point person for Nigeria under the UNFCCC. So you secure your visa, like I mentioned earlier, when you apply for your accreditation, secure your visa so your mind is rest assured. Your travel, itinerary, your return ticket, and accommodation. You pack essential gears, your recorder, your mic, power banks, adapters, and whatever you think will enhance your reporting and make things easy for you when you get to COP. Try to get them ready. Next slide, please. So during the conference, so what I spoke about earlier is before the conference. Now you're at the conference, during the conference while everything is going on. So at every COP meetings, we have what we call the media center. I love that corner very well because they provide you with all the necessary facilities. You have seats, you have your working, space where you can do things. You go out to interview people and then come back to put your stories together. So if anytime you're at COP, I mean, that's always my best corner. Instead of, because covering COP can be overwhelming. You see a whole lot of people. I'm pretty sure that we have even the unseen people covering COP because of the magnitude of people that you see um, at COP. So use your press center resources. You see Wi-Fi, live feeds, and the workspace. Use it efficiently. Attend official sessions and side events. But like I mentioned earlier, one thing that I usually do before traveling to COP, like if the event is starting, like this year's own will be commencing officially on the 10th of November, I try to do an analysis of what Africa as a continent will be pushing for, what Nigeria will be pushing for. When you do your research, you speak to relevant individuals, you will be able to put up such an analysis, a compelling analysis to get people, your audience, have a sense of what the agenda, of what Africa, of what our Nigerian delegation will be championing when they get to Belém, Brazil. So, and that way you'll be able to tell compelling stories, relating it to some of the things that are happening in the country. So follow corridor diplomacy for insider insight. You see some diplomats after conversation, because in some of these rooms, you don't get access to them. When they come out, some of them will share, you get tips on what is really happening in the negotiation room. And that way you'll be able to report, you know, juicy stuff on the ground. You balance global stories with local relevance. In Nigeria, we have the issue of flooding, extreme weather events, droughts, and the likes. What are they saying in the negotiation room around adaptation measures to some of these incidents? What are they saying in the negotiation room around some of the mitigation measures to tackle some of this? You can relate that to what is happening in Nigeria. Painting scenario, painting the right context of what is happening in Nigeria and how the government are also doing that. And they're fleshing it up with voices of people who are attending COP, relevant experts who have a clear knowledge of this. Simplify jargon for your audience. You see different, all manners of their net zero, you see all manners of, you hear all manners of jargons that, because that is the language of the comport. It is your role as journalists to simplify this so that people can easily follow and relate to what is happening. Capture voices from global south, because we feel at the global south we feel the brunt of the climate change effect the most, even though we contributed less according to what the sciences, science researches and all of that, especially the intergovernmental panel on climate change, which is the body that carries out researches around climate change issues. They publishes, they publish their outcome, their research findings. And it is important as journalists to take cognizance of some of these findings as it relates to your region. So you capture voices of global south, youth, the indigenous people. You see indigenous people at COP who are there to pursue their agenda, to ensure that their voices, are captured, are reflected in the negotiation text. So feel free to interact with them. Ask them what brought them to COP. Do some interesting interviews, and then you see diverse perspective of how climate change impact is affecting people across the world. Next slide, please. Networking and strategies. You network. Don't just go and be reporting in silos. Network. When you network, you are bound, something might be happening because you can't be everywhere at the same time. As something is happening in so and so venue, based on your network, chances are that some of these people will be there. You have WhatsApp group, they will say, oh, there's a press briefing going on here. This group are saying this is what is happening. This one is saying this is happening. From there, you'll be able to put together factual stories. So you network, collaborate with other Global South journalists. In most cases, you are all pushing for the same agenda. The only way to let people know what is happening in your country is when you are able to relate um, the happenings in your country and with what is happening, on the global stage. Attend NGO and G77, which comprises, people from the global south largely. Their briefings, they will always organize press briefing to tell you, look, this is why we are here. This is what we are pushing for. From there, you will be able to identify some key people, on the ground to interview and get more insight as to what is really happening there. Build contact. Don't be afraid to interact with people. Don't be shy to engage people. Trust me, as you're working on a particular story and you need the voices to breathe life or maybe a certain data to breathe life to your story, the person standing beside you might be the best fit. So by the time you keep mute and you don't engage, then you see that you just find yourself going round and round and you are unable to do anything. Prioritize sessions strategically. You can't cover everything. Like I mentioned, for me, my priority is Nigeria. First, the second, West Africa, and then Africa. If I find something juicy about Africa that people are talking about, I report it. I interview people. I seek for, the right person you see people are willing to share their thoughts on this. No one is trying to hide anything from you, but you must make use of the information you are getting discreetly and double check, fact check, to be sure that what you are reporting is the right thing. And prioritization, I said that prepare for late night negotiation. Most of the negotiation, drift into the night. I mean, just last month, I was in Geneva to cover the plastics treaty, and the negotiation, the final text for us to see, oftentimes even shift into the night. As a journalist covering this, you must not slip off, because the moment you are dozing off, maybe that's when something important will be said. You just have to follow the conversation. Be ready. You have to be prepared. Get things ready. Prepare your mind. They say opportunity. Some people say opportunity comes but once. For me, I don't agree. Opportunity only goes to the prepared minds. So you must prepare your mind for some of these. So when they change, because anytime the agenda can change, they can say, oh, the final plenary will be by 9. And suddenly, maybe because they are yet to get consensus among some of the parties. And then you just see the schedule again. We say, oh, the plenary has been shifted to XYZ. So you must get yourself prepared for any adjustment that might come up. Next slide, please. So after the conference, after all that has happened at the conference venue, you have to follow up, summarize the main outcome. The UNFCCC is your go-to resource platform. The website, monitor it. They update what is happening time to time. As negotiation is going on, the text that has been adopted, all will be published on the website. So look at them, take a critical look at some of try to summarize the outcome, the agreements, and some of the things that people have raised concern about. And that way, you are able to carry your audience through what has happened. Compare promises with your country's need. Like I said, Nigeria just published its updated, NDC. Go look at it. What did they say they will do in the final text adopted at the end of the conference? Does it relate with what Nigeria is also pushing for? Does it relate with Nigeria's plans, Nigeria's core targets that has that have been captured in the nationally determined contribution document that we submitted? So that way you'll be able to do, a kind of robust analysis of what the final text adopted in the conference mean to your country. Hold governments accountable. I can't overemphasize this enough. I don't know the kind of journalism you're practicing, but for me, I think it is my role to put government on their toes. That's the essence of journalism. You hold people in power accountable, people in offices accountable, um, uh, and also help inform citizens by arming them with the information for them to know what they should know in order to make informed decisions. So you hold government accountable on top commitment. You see government officials at call who will come to make several pledges. I mean, for some of you who might have been following my coverage of COP conversation, I don't forget, if you say you are doing this, and probably you have also cited a timeline, I make sure I follow through, ask, and to know how far, what is going on. Are there challenges? It's important to report some of these so they would know that you are watching and they just don't say things anyhow and then just go to bed to sleep. Um, you see all manners of what we call greenwashing. People will be saying that, oh, we are doing this, that, but if you check on the crowd, they are doing the other side, the opposite. Continue climate reporting beyond COP. Don't just say, oh, because you have gone to COP and you're back, and that's the end. You have to follow up, and you have to continue reporting, and that's where you remain relevant within the space. It is a space where you can carve out a niche for yourself if properly reported. And I urge journalists to continue in this line. Next slide, please. So this is some tips. I thought it's important for as journalists from the global south, like myself. I said apply for funding, syndication opportunities. You can collaborate with other platforms. That's what I mean by syndication. Collaborate with them. Write to them as journalists. Don't get yourself boxed. If you feel, oh, I want to work with Data Fight on some of these, you can write to them. Go to their website. You see email addresses. You don't need to know anybody there. No platform will turn down an opportunity for them to improve on their operation. The goal of every platform is to improve on their and deliver a great stuff based on their mission and mandates, and their core values. So long what you're proposing to do aligns seamlessly with um what makes them who they are, I'm sure they will support you. They want to collaborate, and that way you'll be able to achieve greater impact. The next thing is highlight marginalized voices. For instance, there are farmers, local farmers in Nigeria, who have lost everything as a result of the extreme weather event, whether drought or the flooding that is happening. But most times, these negotiations going on at COP, you don't have them there to even share their experiences. You see some people who would deliberately mobilize local farmers to bring them to COP so they can come and see what is happening. Because people who are negotiating on their behalf, they don't even have a clearer sense of what is happening. Let's
Let's just give him a minute. I'm almost guessing that it is his network. Let's give him a minute. Just a minute to just sort that out. Okay. So if we can't get him on the call, probably in 20 seconds, um, then I'll just pass the mic to our next speaker. I know he's trying to join back. I probably don't want to touch into his slide, but if I can't get him under 20 seconds, then I'll probably assume it's the network and we just run through our second speaker. Vivian, are you available? You can just give me a thumbs up or a sign just to notify that you're available. I'm seeing if I can get Mojit back, but I guess he's having network issues. All right, thank you. So give me a second. Let me confirm from him. Once I can't get him back, then we'll just move on to you. All right, he's back. Okay. Thank you, sir. I guess Nigeria happened. um, so if you can hear me, you can just continue.
Okay, okay. Apologies for that. I don't want to say my village people uh at the cause, because my
That's why I
village
said
people are
Nigeria.
good people. Um, so I think where did we stop? Tips for Global South journalists. I was talking about overcoming access barriers with persistence. and networks. I mentioned you creating your network, interact with people. Don't be shy to engage people, to talk to people. In our local parlance, they will say, person wey ask question, no dey miss road. Feel free to ask question when you are confused. So that way you'll be able to report accurately. And also use interpreters when necessary. I know one of the barriers I faced in Geneva was that most of them are, they are French-speaking folks. And me, I know hear French, you know. Then when they were saying we should learn French, I was busy saying that it's not my mother tongue. And as a result of that, um, language could be a barrier, but feel free to ask or use interpreters. Frame local climate realities within the global context. I know, was it not in Dubai? There was this conversation about the loss and damage and all of that. How can you bring in the loss and damages incurred as a result of climate change, the realities faced by people, in your country, in your region, in your community to relate with what they're even talking about when it comes to loss and damage, because it's a fund that is designated for people who have recorded significant losses, as a result of extreme climate change, events and all of that. So feel free to frame what is happening within some of these conversation and thematic areas that have been discussed at call. Next slide, please. I think we're running out of time already. Let me see if I can run through this. Key themes at COP, you see net zero targets, countries' pathways to net zero emission. I know Nigeria is trying to achieve net zero by 2060. Loss and damage, as mentioned earlier, climate justice, issues between developed and developing nations. You see that strong conversation. You see that burning conversation emanating from the rooms between developed countries believed to be the drivers of this climate change we're facing, and developing countries feeling the brunt of it, who are saying, look, you have to pay for what you've done. You have to compensate us for what you have done. And now even the conversation is tilting towards, look, we don't want climate finance in the form of loans. We want climate finance in the form of grants. I believe some journalists who covered the just concluded African Climate Summit in Addis Ababa must have seen that that is what the African Union, that is what the African leaders are saying. You must know this and hold it at your fingertips. Use them to paint relevant context in your story whenever you are telling these stories. Biodiversity linkages. How does extreme weather events and even the conversation they are having, what's the connection between it and climate change and biodiversity losses as we experience here? Another thing is that, like in our country, we can see expansive farmland or hectares, areas of land being submerged as a result of overflowing water. We report about people, the lives that have lost as a result of that. But do we also tell the stories of biodiversity? Because this biodiversity, some of us, because the connection between them, they help us to maintain balance, on Earth. So you just can't do without them. As biologists, we believe the gene and man and the environment makes up an individual. So when the environment is not conducive, there's likely not going to be effective and efficient reproduction. So it's important that we take cognizance of the environment, biodiversity, the flora and the fauna, whether in the aquatic ecosystem and all of that. How does this extreme weather event we are facing, how is it also impacting on them? Try to find that connection and also report on them. Next slide, please. So reporting tips, I think I've mentioned some of these. You contextualize, explain COP outcomes in simple terms, um, um, and also in context of global, goals like the Paris Agreement. If you've not gone through the different paragraphs contained in the Paris Agreement and what countries are trying to achieve within the text in that paragraph, please, I encourage you to do so. To cover this bit, you must also endeavor to read more and try to engage experts to explain some of the things that you don't understand, so you don't report out of ignorance. Your goal is to make people informed so they can make informed decisions. So the only way you can do that is when you are informed. Stakeholder voices, engage, like I mentioned earlier, speak to me, include perspective from governments, identify the delegation from your country, from Africa. In Africa, we have what we call the African Group of Negotiators. Identify them, check their Twitter handle, they post updates. NGOs, there are relevant NGOs there at COP who will be campaigning and pushing for different agenda to be included in the text. Speak to them. You see activists, scientists, businesses. You will see young people. In fact, one of the corners I enjoy so much to just go and get myself decompressed at COP is the youth pavilion. You see different pavilion activities, hundreds of activities happening simultaneously. So you just engage them and see you'll be able to tell better stories at COP. Local connections link global COP discussions to local national climate issues in Nigeria and Africa. Data and facts, like data breathes life to stories. Use credible data on emissions, impacts, and even pledges. So if you check Nigeria's NDC, the updated NDC, you see what Nigeria is pledging and what they are seeking, the fund, the finances they are seeking in order for them to achieve that. So that can help you better paint, issues in the right perspective when you understand some of these. Then the human stories. Narrative of people affected by climate change and impact. So basically, stories are just about the people. So, and it's subject to how you frame them. When you frame stories in the right perspective, then you'll be able to highlight some of these issues better, and people will be able to relate to them very well. So the narrative of people affected, you just can't brush that aside. You should be able to tell their stories as it relates to what is happening in your country. Next slide, please. Yeah, I thought it's important for me to also share some story angles. I believe maybe the next speaker will also be able to hammer on this. Vivian has also reported extensively on climate change issues. She's one of the journalists I would describe as the mother of climate change issues in Nigeria. She's so passionate about it. And just also, it's important for me to mention that like me, because I have a science background, I can also easily relate to some of these jargons, but you see Vivian coming from the communications angle and being able to deliver on climate change issues and report on it um, very well. So don't think maybe because you are not a science student so you can't do it. No, you can. All you just need to put your mind to it and follow some of these tips. Trust me, you will go deliver. The key stories angle, negotiations and agreements. Focus on key negotiation outcomes like the thematic areas I mentioned earlier. The pledges made by countries. Make sure you know what your NDC is saying. In our case, Nigeria, NDC 3.0. You to even make it juicer, you can take note of what we promised in NDC 1, NDC 2, and now NDC 3. You see how we are scaling up our ambitious targets, towards addressing climate change issues. Climate impact, human stories of climate change impacts, and also the vulnerabilities. Highlight all of these, mitigation and adaptation. What are we doing? What are the strategies you are trying to adopt in order to reduce the impact of climate change so we can adapt? They say adaptation is the key to survival. So you see countries trying to, maybe if it is to expand drainages, plant more trees, and all of these, the amount they are voting to carry out some of these activities, take note of them. You see some of these things that Nigeria has pledged in our NDC. I encourage us to, I think it's about 70-page document. I encourage you as a journalist covering these bits to try to get yourself acquainted to some of the key provisions highlighted in this in the NDC. Next slide, please. So more tips, technology, innovation. Yeah, we are trying to address climate change. Countries are trying to see some of the technologies to adopt. Climate tech, renewable energy, sustainable solution. Nigeria is pushing for, you see some of the technologies Nigeria is trying to adopt in order to make sure that they leave no one behind when it comes to issue of energy access, just energy access. The finance and funding, climate finance commitment, challenges in funding for developing nations. You may want to engage experts in this regard to really understand why is Nigeria getting enough funding? If they are getting enough, are they doing the right thing with the finances to getting? You can start conversation with some of these they're reporting, the youth and activity, the role of youth movement. Like I mentioned, I said, you have the youth pavilion where you see youths um, um, advocating, pushing their own agenda, what they want the youth voices to be reflected, and all of that. You can make a whole lot of sense from this when you engage this group of people at COP. Next slide, please. So I just thought it's because some people might be thinking, it's just talking, 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 talking. Like I believe this session is supposed to be practical. So I just thought to share this from the last COP. Of course, if you Google, you see some stories that we did when we were at COP 28. From the last COP, this is just a few of the stories that speak to the thematic areas that I mentioned earlier. But because it's just only me, I no go kill myself. So you don't get overwhelmed and get burned out. You just try to do what you can do, but make use of your attendance judiciously. So these are some of the few stories, example, that I did. The new funding proposal for developing countries sparks debate amidst huge disparity. And you can do that after, you've engaged with people, they've published maybe the first draft text and all of that. You look at it and even get perspective from people from developing countries, relevant experts. And you get to hear what they are saying about it, what to expect from climate summit in Baku. This is usually like, an analysis that I do at the early stage of the conversation to let people know that, oh, this and this and this is what the conversation is likely going to be. It's a sort of analysis. Um, so we also have another one. World leaders agree on 300 billion climate finance deal for poorer countries. I think that was the major highlight of last year's COP. You see, even though people describe it as a joke, in quote, because they feel that's not enough, we cannot address anything. It's important for me to emphasize this here. As journalists, you are not an activist. You are not going there to push for any. Your purpose is to report on the issues. Set aside your emotion, your prejudice. Just report on the issues, what is happening, and that's it. So the 7 key demands of African negotiators amidst draft text showdown. So in the midst of it, so I thought it's important for me to let people know what is Africa demanding for. I'm looking at some of the drama, playing out on the ground at COP, and that what actually birthed that story. Next slide, please. So COP29 deal agreed for full operationalization of loss and damage fund. I know last year, the loss and damage fund was, um, uh, that was in, I think, no, in Dubai, we had the issue that where the loss and damage fund was operationalized, and then the deal was agreed for full operational for it to kickstart. You may want to also follow up as a journalist when you get to COP on what is the stage. Our country now assessing this funding. How much has been disbursed to countries in need, in quotes, so far? Has Nigeria been able to get anything from this? You may want to do that. Scorecard. Nigerian CSOs, they criticize outcome demand, more inclusive summits. So these are, I mentioned you covering the summit before the conference, during the conference, and after the conference. And that way you're able to cover the full life cycle of you attending COP. And you're able to even beat your chest to say, oh, yes, I try my best. I try. But like I said, it can be overwhelming. Next slide, please. Yeah. Thank you for listening. I believe with these few points of mine, I've been able to convince, but not to confuse you that
Confused.
climate climate change reporting can be achieved when you prepare effectively before and during and even after the conference. And thank you so much for listening. I appreciate that.
Thank you very, very much. I'll hold off. If you have your questions, just drop it on the chat. I'll hold off on some of the questions so that I can just allow Vivian to share our own experience. And like I said, one of the things we wanted to ensure is like this obviously is being recorded so that we send it out to as much as many journalists who can also listen and know that the whole negotiation. I mean, COP is something I'm always looking forward to attend one day, but then I've had a lot of colleagues go, and the whole negotiations, if there's anything you want to pick out, can be overwhelming, right? And you want to be prepared before you go so that you don't just have you entering one room to another room, and at the end of the day, you're not even producing up to 5 stories, and you've spent 2 weeks there, right? You want to be able to report from several angles and make sure you're reporting it on ground. So we hold off on several questions that even personally I would like to ask, and just bring Vivian on so that she can also share her experience. So my Oga Vivian, if you are on, you can just I can just yield the mic to you, and yeah, you can take it off from there.
Abdul Karim, are you sure you've not confused them? Okay.
That is why we have you. That is why we have you.
You're not serious. If I'm the mother of climate change, you're the father.
I'm the baby. I accept to just be the baby.
Yeah, nice. Thank you, Abdul Karim. That was good. And I like the fact that you took your time to even break it down like to the simplest, terms. So I'm going to try to, I think you've spoken to a couple of things that are also in my slide, but let me see how I can speak to some other parts as well. Can you, it's, you're not projecting a full screen, King. So hi,
Abama.
everybody.
Okay.
Uh, okay. I'm still seeing the PPT back, like, yeah, better. So hi, everybody. My name is Vivian Chime. I'm the Africa correspondent for Climate Home News. Climate Home is it's an international online news service that covers climate change and the energy transition. So we do everything from climate diplomacy, the climate talks and negotiations. We are always there. At least at every COP, we have up to 4 or 5 of our journalists at the conference. So it's basically the lifeblood of what we do. And I'm just going to try to maybe give some tips from, my coverage over the years. I started covering COP in 2022 as well, COP 27 in Egypt, then COP 28 in Dubai, last year in Baku, and this year's one in Brazil. Then, next slide, please. Next slide, Candy. So I'm going to try to talk you through, what COP is. I don't know if any of you here has covered COP. If this is your first time, I'm going to try to maybe just explain what it means and understanding some of the blocks and the processes, the negotiation tracks, there are some tips as well to report on COP. Okay. So if you follow what Abdul Karim said, COP has a lot of COP has a lot of moving parts, right? It has a lot of moving parts. So if you're not careful, you can get lost. And I'm going to use an example my friend used in her story, my Kenyan friend Lily Sinjeru, shout out to her. I'm going to put that story in the link. And I'm using this analogy because it kind of relates to what I'm going to put the link in the chat. I'm using it because it kind of helps us relate to what the negotiations can look like in the simplest, minute terms. So in the Africa setting, and even in Nigeria as well, you have this dowry paying ceremony. I'll use where I'm from, that's the Igbos. You have this dowry paying ceremony, people come and they're in like a room, they are locked up, your omunas, they are there. I don't know what it's called in Yoruba or Hausa, but your father's relatives, they are there, the umuadas, they are there, that's the daughters of the land, they are there. Your husband's side, they are there, there are different people in the room, and then the negotiation starts. In my own case, when I got married, my husband had to put money on the table, and then the umuna will say, "This is not enough, right? We want more." And then the umada will come and say, "Oh, you've not given us our kulanoto, you've not given us our palm wine, you've not given us our money." So everybody gets a share of that, dowry. So that's just the simplest way to understand how negotiations go at COP. Now think of that traditional setting and multiply it times 100. You have like 10,000, 60,000, 35,000 people all hitting at one thing. You must do this. You must get us this. Developed countries must do this. Developing countries need this. That is what happens at COP. And most times it's all about money. It just boils down to money. These guys are asking for, like Abdul was saying when he presented L&D, that's loss and damage. This one say, oh, no, we need money for just transition. This one say, no, we need money for adaptation. We need money for mitigation. Everybody's dragging, right? But at the end of the day, it's still all about people. Survival, adaptation, mitigation, reducing the impact of greenhouse gases on the climate system. That's basically the aim of this whole thing. So let's go to the next slide. Meanwhile, that image is AI generated. Yes, so in thinking about COP, it's a gathering of 197 countries plus the EU. So imagine all of these things are happening and you have 197 countries in that space. That's why it gets really big. Like you're having almost 100,000 people gathering in one place. So it can be massive and it can be tense. Fights can break out. Like I think last year it was the LDCs, that's least developed countries, and the ALCs out of the room because they didn't get what they wanted, they were not consulted, and so they had to leave. So it's an addition because it's not necessarily like a country, it's just like the AU. So it's not considered a party. So it's 197 countries plus the EU. And COP means Conference of the Parties. It's a gathering of all these countries with one aim under the UNFCCC, that's United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, with the aim to prevent damaging greenhouse gas emissions and limiting human interference with the climate system. So that's all we are here for. We want to limit human interference. We're a group of countries, 197 plus the EU, Conference of the Parties. That's what all this is about. Next slide, please. So the first COP was held in Belém, Germany in 1995. And this year's own, which is in Brazil, is the 30th session of that Conference of the Parties. You know, prior to this, there were other consultations like from Rio de Janeiro, where they decided, okay, they want to do it sometime in 1992. And then they decided, oh, science is little science was being done at the time. But mind you, the fossil fuel industry already knew about climate change. I mean, even like since the 1970s, companies like Shell already started, doing their research. Their researchers were already looking into this thing, human impact from our emissions and stuff like that. So they already knew. And so from the start, they started infusing their own messaging, debunking, trying to stop what's happening, or trying to get the world not to come together to fight this. But eventually the world did. And in 1995, the first conference of the party started, and now we're in the 30th session. Normally the host country rotates. So among the UN recognized regions, you have Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, Caribbean, Central and Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and others. That's where United Nations, Australia, Canada, etc. fall under, right? So Africa is going to be hosting the COP32, that's in 2027, and Nigeria has registered interest, even though we've not heard anything again since then. And another country that's registered interest is Ethiopia. Ethiopia announced it during the Africa Climate Summit that they are willing to host. And if you see what they are doing, with their country and with the hosting of the Africa Climate Summit, they seem quite prepared. But we are looking at the end of the day, the Africa group of negotiators are going to have to decide who in Africa gets to host the COP. Yeah, I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, so at the conference, there are negotiating groups and blocks. So that when you get there, you're not confused. Abdulkarim mentioned it a lot in his presentation, that it can get really confusing. It's a massive conference, and if you're not careful, you get lost. You lose your mind because you're trying to understand what exactly is happening here. Like, why is everybody saying AGN, LDC, AOCs, ILAC? You will get confused. So these are negotiating groups and blocks. There's Africa Group, which is the Africa Group of Negotiators, AGN. It's a group of 54 African countries. So all African countries are captured under this group. Then there is G77 and China. It's now these are interest groups. That's how you should look at them. So it's more like as we're here now, we're all here because we want to learn about climate change, reporting on the COP and all that. So group of countries can just come and say, so you have a river in your country as well, Abi. Okay, you have river, but you're 5 of us. Let's come together so that we'll push our agenda. We'll keep pushing for one thing. That's how it works. So Africa is pushing for Africa. The G77 plus China are developing countries, and some of the major emerging economies. We have South Africa, China, they are all in this group. So developing countries from Africa, from Asia, they are all in this group. And that's because developing countries have the same goal, which is to get more money from developed countries for them to pay for their historical emissions, for developing countries to adapt and build resilience against climate change, right? So they came together. And usually in this group, China is like the big daddy because, of course, they've been making a lot of moves lately. So together, they keep pushing for their own agenda. Then there's the least developed countries. And I put these ones in this smaller box because we're African journalists here, and I would want us to be interested in these three. There are other ones that Africa overlaps in this other bigger circle, but this smaller one where you have the AGN, the G77, the least developed countries, there are African countries there. They are pushing for the same interests. And so it's good that you know what they are saying because it's definitely going to affect your country. Currently, Africa Group is led by Tanzania, Richard Muyungi, and the least developed countries is led by Malawi. So they have like a 1 year cycle of leadership. After that, it moves to another country to lead, to chair the bloc. Now you have this other bigger circle where you have the Arab states, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. These guys are also strong in negotiations because they keep pushing for their oil interests. And one thing about COP is everybody has to agree. So we're in a room, we're saying, give us finance. We want so and so amount. And then they agree that we're going to take this amount. And then somebody comes and says, no, I'm not taking it. That's how the negotiation will stop until everybody's on the same page. So most times when they start talking about fossil fuels, Saudi Arabia is always coming out to say one thing or the other that will hold negotiations. And then people start reporting, journalists are reporting, Saudi Arabia is holding the conversations, this one, Dubai is saying this one. That's how it works. So these Arab states, very interesting set of people who are always pushing for their oil interests when they get to COP. The AOC, the Alliance for Smaller Land States, you have the Caribbean, the Pacific, the Indian Oceans, Tuvalu, Solomon Islands, all those, Trinidad and Tobago, all of those countries that fall under this Alliance of Small Island States. You have the ILAC, the Independent Association of Latin America and Caribbean. You have LMDCs, like-minded developing country groups. I would advise that you go ahead and read more about these things because whatever information I'm going to give you on this call or even Abdul Karim, it still behoves on the journalists to go back and sit down and learn and read and understand what all this is all about because, yeah, it's a whole lot. You can't even get all of it in this session. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. Okay, so there are negotiation tracks that happens at these conferences. And one thing I'm going to tell you is this. These negotiations continue to happen throughout the year. It doesn't stop. From the COP, they move to the media talks in Bonn. They have, different groups keep having their sessions within the year. They can choose. There was even one that happened, I think, last month on adaptation. They can choose times to decide to talk about it. They have sessions like this L&D, the Loss and Damage Fund. They've been having sessions. I attended one earlier this year where they're saying, some guidelines are going to come out in October. From next year, February, they start putting out the call. So it just keeps happening. You have to follow through, right? And maybe it's easier for me to follow through because that is what my office does fully. So we're always following. But if you can't follow through, you can always maybe just keep reporting on what you're reporting on, keep getting, holding government accountable with their commitments, but keep your eyes out and even read platforms like Climate Home to be able to know, when what is happening, you're following the conversation, you're following the diplomacy, because when they get to COP, it continues. Now, I give you an example. In Bonn, last year in Baku, they had the global goal and adaptation negotiations. They couldn't make progress because of the indicators. They had a huge number of indicators. Sometimes indicators can run up to even 4,000 and all that. And then negotiators are like, okay, how are we going to break this thing down so the numbers can come down? In Bonn, they continue that negotiation. That's the media talks in Germany. That one is usually a smaller conference. It's not as big as the COP. So in Bonn, they continue that talk. And the GGA, it was hard fought, but it made some progress. I'm going to drop the story I did in the chat. They made some progress. And so the indicators came down to about, I think, 113. And now In COP30, they are going to continue the conversation. So I'm just going to explain briefly what these negotiation tracks mean. Yeah. So we have the GGA. Now, all these countries are together, 197 countries. Give us money, don't give us money, do this, do that, grant-based, concessional. But at the end of the day, everybody isn't covering everything. There are negotiators that are focused on adaptation. There are negotiators that are focused on mitigation. There are negotiators that are focused on just transition, climate finance, gender work program. It goes on and on. So you ask yourself, where, and like Abdulkarim said, you can't cover everything. So the GGA, the Global Goal and Adaptation, is aimed at enhancing countries' resilience and their capacity to adapt to climate change impacts. So under that negotiation track, people are talking about, okay, what are the things that countries need to do? They need to build roads in such and such way. We need money. We need to do it this way. So what happens is they bring out all of these indicators to show. The indicators are like measures that you can use to track if a country is actually meeting its adaptation measures or building adaptation for its country. But at the end of the day, it boils down to money. Developed countries need to bring money for developing countries to do that. So why were they even fighting on indicators? It was still about money. Give us money. So and usually in core parlance, they call it means of implementation. Anywhere you hear means of implementation in COP, they won't tell you money, they won't say finance, they will just say means of implementation. We are fighting on means. Once they tell you means of implementation, just know they're talking about money. And of course, there are other things there like capacity building, technology transfer, but most especially is the money aspect that they're talking about. So you have the mitigation work program, which has to do with scaling up action and ambition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Then that's also another track of its own. Now you have to know that different experts monitor different things. You can't meet a GGA expert and asking the person what is happening in gender work program. He or she won't know. So you when you're reaching out, you have to also understand what does this person for? What do you follow? Can I have a talk with you? Can we sit down and talk about this? Can you tell me what's happening in the negotiation rooms? Because sometimes journalists are not allowed to enter into those rooms. I think I missed a slide. Kende, can you go back a bit? Sorry. It just clicked. Go back. Yes, to the start, to the beginning. Yes, okay, yeah. I missed, yes, the one with the colors. The one with the, no. There's a green, yellow, yes, this. Okay, I've not gotten to it. Okay, sorry. Let's just go back to where we were. So I just wanted to talk about because you have your badges. So there's also the Just Transition Work Program, which deals with supporting workers and communities that are affected by transition away from fossil fuels towards cleaner energy. So when we talk about transition, people are saying the transition has to be just. The just in that it means justice, right? So I'm a worker who works in the oil and gas industry, and they are always talking about my job, how they want to close down oil companies or a coal miner. They're always talking about how they're going to close down coal mines. So what happens to me then, right? Because that means I lose work, I lose money. My family is affected. I have to start looking for new skills to move into new sectors. So that's what this just transition is about. People in places like South Africa that depend on the coal mines, even the communities that they are serving, like if the Niger Delta, you have some of these oil companies doing like projects for them, like roads, street light, all those things. Some of those things are going to stop if they are shut down, right? So the Just Transition Work Program says you have to make sure that these guys are catered to as well. And that's where labor comes in. So labor rights, these are workers that are going to lose their jobs. You have to do this for them and that. So you will be seeing all the trade unions coming, shouting. Even, I think it was in Dubai, I interviewed Nigeria's, was it our trade, somebody that leads one of these trade things. So NLC, Nigeria Labour Congress, yes. And they were there as well. So everybody's there pushing their own interest. You must make sure that our workers are taken care of. So what are they asking for? They want to be upskilled. They want to be taken into newer roles when this happens. If the transition is successful, they have to make sure that they are insured and they can move, to other sectors. So that's what the Just Transition program is all about. You talk about gender. And that's why anytime I talk about climate change, I tell journalists, don't think climate change is just for scientists or journalists or people who understand the technicalities, right? Climate change is for everybody. If you're reporting on health, you can report climate change in health because climate change is affecting health as well. And there are NGOs and negotiators and civil society organizations that push for those interests at COP. So now look at gender. We're talking about gender, even in the climate conversation. So there's a work program specifically for gender. This is where you start hearing things like Gender Action Plan, Lima Work Program, this one, that one. They're all talking about the gender work program. So it aims to ensure gender inclusion and the establishment of gender-responsive climate policies in countries and even gender representation at the COP negotiations. Because sometimes you can come to the COP and see like 100 men and it's just about 3 women that are part of the leaders present. So it needs to be gender balanced. Then there's also the talk on climate finance. This is usually one of the biggest. You're hearing $100 billion, you're hearing 1.3 T, you're hearing, adaptation finance. All those things fall under climate finance. So it aims to make sure that there are financial provisions to support developing countries in their climate action efforts, right? The newest goal is the 1.3 trillion, which is going to continue. The conversations are going to continue in Belém. This 1.3 trillion is to replace the $100 billion that was set in 2009 in Copenhagen. The COP in Copenhagen in 2009, they said that developed countries are going to make $100 billion available to developing countries from 2020 to 2025 annually, right? And that one passed. Now they are moving to a new goal, which they started with the negotiations last year. They're going to continue Belém. And this new goal is supposed to start in 2026. So you might want to keep your ears out for what happens with this conversation, because at Baku, they agreed on $300 billion, but developing countries are still not happy, right? They said, oh, we're going to mobilize $300 billion and then continue mobilizing till 1.3 T. So the conversation is going to continue in Belém. But there's something I also want you to note. If you go to COP, you might not be hearing, you'll definitely be hearing GGA and all these things. But sometimes the conversation you can be hearing UAE Belém roadmap, Baku adaptation roadmap, Baku to Belém roadmap, UAE dialogue, Lima work program. All of these things have their place in all of these tracks. So that's why I put that caveat down. Note, sometimes the track names change to enable work to continue in future talks. So example, the Baku adaptation roadmap is the GGA, is gender adaptation, global goal and adaptation. The UAE Belém roadmap is the GGA. So more like this thing started in Dubai, we're continuing it to Belém. And then Baku to Belém roadmap is the 1.3 trillion. So it started in Baku, we're continuing it in Belém. UAE dialogue is the global stocktake. In Dubai, they did this, okay, we have been pushing this thing for how many years now, right? How do we now assess what we have done over time? So in Dubai, they did that. They did the global stocktake. They took stock of what they've achieved, countries and all that. And then the Lima work program is the gender work program. Gender action plan is under the gender work program. So all of these things have their place in the negotiation. So whenever you hear them, just acquaint yourself with these terms, know what you're talking about at any point, know how to engage the experts, know what you're talking to them about, and yeah, you're going to be able to report effectively. Next slide, please. So now we go to reporting tips, handy tips. Abdul Karim has mentioned a couple, and I did that. I did that kind of preview, maybe like just to precedence to show you what it feels like, right? All of that, Chris. That's just a little bit of what it looks like. But here, I'm going to be talking you through some reporting tips, what you can do when you get to the conference. I want you to get yourself acquainted with these colors. You have the orange, that is the most important one to you. It says media. That is the one you're going to get. I think I have mine some of mine here. So for you not to get confused, in some conferences like Africa Climate Summit we went to, the media, it was, you could use this to know it will be red and all that, but at COP everybody has the same color here. But this is where you should be looking at this orange, right? So you have orange, which is the media, you have the head of delegation. Now, for example, if Nigeria is going to COP, it might be Tenioye, that might Magic Kudumi, that's our NCCC DG, that might lead us to COP. So she might be the one to have this head of delegation tag. So it's going to be red. Then you have the NGOs and the CSOs. These guys are your friends because most times they know a lot of what's happening inside the rooms. National party delegates, they are the people who follow the head of the delegation. You know, national delegation, they are there with Tenioye. They can be in some of the negotiating rooms as well. They are able to tell you what's happening with your country and with your region, like your bloc, like the AGN. The observer states, IGOs, that's intergovernmental organizations, non-NGOs, they are also here. These observer status, you have to like apply for it through the UNFCCC especially and all that. So these guys also, you can ask them any questions. They are able to access some of the rooms. Then you have the UN observer. These guys might not talk to you so much because they are basically there for work, but they are good for making contact, networking, for future reference and all that. Yeah, but most times UN agencies also send their workers and their people to the conference to monitor and observe what's happening at the conference. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some tips. I believe Karim already touched on a couple. You cannot cover everything, like he said. You can't, even if you tried. You're just gonna run. It's gonna be crazy, right? Even in my first COP, I did more than 13 stories because I was literally everywhere. But even at the end of the day, I couldn't cover everything. You still have to build your focus, right? And that's why the second tip says plan, plan, plan. You have to plan. You're going for a conference like that and you just jump into it, you're going to be blown away. So you have to plan. And if you go to the UNFCCC website, when you have the side events, you have the program, you can even like start reaching out to organizations. You write down the things you want to cover, the side events you want to attend. You can reach out to organizations to say, I'm attending this conference and this is my focus. It's in line with what you do. And I really want you to speak with your experts when I'm there or even before you go there, things like that. So you have to plan ahead of time. This story, Women and Climate Justice in Africa, that I did for Frederick Ebert Stiftung under Climate Tracker Fellowship. Before I went to the conference, I visited this community in Abuja where the farmers had already lost their farmlands, their rice farms, everything had already been flooded. That was in 2022 when we had that heavy flooding. So what I did was I spoke to the women. I got their own their take, because what happened, sorry, I just want to confirm that you can still hear me, Kende.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. So this woman in this picture, I couldn't get the whole thing because this woman in the picture, she has now moved to making kunu or something, right? All this soya milk, because her farmland was flooded and she needs to survive. So she started doing something else in the process, and no reparation, nobody gave her any money, nothing to live by. So she started this. Then there was this other woman as well, who her own self, she borrowed money to do the farmland, and now the flooding came. So what I did was I took their stories and I went to the conference, and that was where I did gender work program and joined it with what's happening in the local and said, this is what these guys are fighting for. And that is why we are here, so that women like this can be helped to adapt and build resilience. So that's where the second one, it's global, yet it's very, very local, because most things that are happening in your communities are in relation to what's happening in that global conference. So yeah, that was what happened with the story. So I planned ahead. Imagine if I didn't have the story or I didn't plan ahead, I wouldn't have had that story to join with what's happening in the global stage. So it also helps your audience back home to say, oh, so this is what this is about, right? So, our women are dying from floods, our women are being affected, our agriculture is being affected. So this is what they're talking about. This is how it affects me, right? So that is what that does for you. You have to join the local to the global. So you have to plan, you have to reach out to experts, you have to organize your interviews ahead and stuff like that. Then you're gonna have to get acquainted with, no, just give me a minute. Sorry. We're in Nigeria and yeah, crazy things. I needed to reduce the noise. Okay, so it's global yet it's very local, right? So as much as possible, try and relate it. If you also look at this story that I did on adaptation on Nigeria's flood, when that flood happened, that was the Niger flood. I didn't just say, okay, flood in Nigeria has happened, people have died and all that. There is a global aspect to it, which is the adaptation plan. Why does Nigeria not have an adaptation plan? Developing countries, I think up to 20 already have adaptation plans. Nigeria has been working on its own since like 2020. They have like a framework. Why don't we have an adaptation plan? People are dying from these things. And it will interest you to know that this particular issue, there was a World Bank funding that had already been approved. And, the Niger state government, it was approved last year. And Niger state government just put out calls for application in April, just before this incident happened. So if that money was utilized, we probably wouldn't have had this issue. So these are things you need to be following. They are saying countries should get their national adaptation plans set up so that we can even know, even if money comes, how do we even help you? How, if money comes now, how do you channel it? How do you want to, where do you want to put it to? Have you said these are the things, this is the type of things you're going to do, these are the type of roads? Yet we don't have that. So these are things we have to be following to know how to hold our leaders accountable. Then something else that happens at COP is the COP usually has a buzz team. I think that's what I'm going to call it. It's every year there's usually that buzz team. In Egypt, they say, oh, Egypt is Africa's COP. It's the implementation COP. We have to reach $100 billion. We're going to reach $100 billion. And that's one part. So it's also good to follow what's happening in those central or buzz teams. In Dubai, we had the phase out fossil fuels, tripling renewable energy by 2030. Those buzzwords, people keep hammering on them, so you have to also follow. In Baku, it was the 1.3 trillion, right? We have to make sure that the 1.3 trillion is put on the table. This. So there is that central thing. While you can't cover everything, you can choose to focus on one thing like, adaptation, but you see that central messaging. Try to know what's happening there, because every time the draft text keeps dropping, the UNFCCC website is your friend. Make sure when you go to the website, you can see, if I was presenting, I would have gone to the website. You can see COP30, you see COP30, then you click, you would start seeing the programs, the sessions, the webcast for people covering from home. The webcast is your friend. You will see sessions that you can follow, you can listen in, and you can get your stories, and you can even reach out to these experts and you can get your stories. So always know that central thing. In Belém, they are going to be talking about, they've tagged Belém Implementation COP. So they're going to be talking about 1.3 trillion. How do we now implement? Like the story I did from the Africa Climate Summit, the Brazil team said that they are looking at a way for COP to be, for it to be an implementation COP. So these adaptation metrics that we're trying to discuss or agree upon, how can it translate to real world action? So it's not just about talk. Then I said, get acquainted with the venue. When you get there, Karim talked about this a whole lot. Get acquainted with the press conference room. And I always advise, go a day ahead. Don't arrive on the day of the conference and start shouting, I don't understand what's going on here. Go a day ahead. There are always maps across the venue that shows you, okay, it can be confusing, but if you go a day, 2 days, 3 days, you get used to the venue. So there are maps in different parts of the conference that shows you, okay, these are where media rooms are, these are where the negotiation rooms, pavilions, they have arrows showing. So please get acquainted with those things, the pavilions, the side event rooms, the press conference rooms. The pavilion, good to know your country's pavilion, very important. You go there, you get their own agenda, because sometimes the agenda might not be in the UNFCCC page. So you get their own agenda, you know different times they have events, you check the ones you want to attend, you write them down, and when it's time, you go there. And there are always things happening in the country's pavilion. And that's where you start hearing them saying all sorts of things. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. Sometimes, I think was it last, I can't remember, or last 2 years, I went to the pavilion and they were there cutting foreign countries to come and invest. We have wetlands, we have this and that. And there was this very good story that Okwe Adetayo had done at the time. So I liaised with him and we asked the question, what about some of these estate approvals or estate buildings that you're putting on wetlands in Lagos and in those places? And then they dodged. They didn't want to answer that question. People were murmuring because they know that they are not doing what they are saying. You're out there telling foreign companies to come, but back home, you're investing in estates, people building in protected areas, which is not good. So these are things you have to be very alert, know what's happening on the ground, so you can connect it to what's happening there. Yes, so that pavilion is very important. Side event rooms, there are different side events, NGOs, CSOs, even private sector. Different people used to have side events that you can attend, get experts, your panelists. If they finish, you can rush to them, ask them questions in relation to what you're covering. And press conference rooms. Also, be aware of press conference rooms, because most times, even the COP presidency, the different negotiators, there are briefings happening. So they might say, oh, this briefing is happening in this press conference room A. You have to know where press conference room A is. Or press conference room B, you have to start running there, because usually in Dubai, the place was like a city, like it was as if we were in a big town, right? That was where the conference. So you have to get yourself acquainted. Then get acquainted with the UNFCCC website. I already said this. For those covering offsite, you have to know how to access it, the webcast, the documents keep dropping on that site. Some of the stories that we do is some of the documents, when the draft text drops, there's this story I did, I think, is this phase out or not? Fossil fuels on front burner as COP 28 enters over time. The moment the text dropped at around 4 p.m., I started this report. At around 4 p.m. on this, the new text dropped. That's the some fossil fuel something. And then we started. And I wrote down, I went out, I interviewed people, I added it, and I sent out the story. So you have to be working on, you have to be very attentive to what's happening. Then social media is your friend. Please hold social media, because that's where a lot of people keep comments. They're explaining, as somebody like Simon Evans from Carbon Brief, people like even my news editor Jolu, they keep putting things. Oh, this has happened. This is what's happened. This is what it means. They screenshot some of the text. They send it. They explain. So if you want to really understand some things that are going on, please hug social media, follow some of these people, follow their comments. And another thing social media does for you, if you're not able to interview somebody directly, their comments on social media can be used in your story, that the person said this or said that. Then you can set up interviews on social media, even ahead of the conference. That's where you will be able to reach out to people. I'm doing this, I'm going to be at the conference. Can I get your contact? Can we connect? Can we organize interviews? You can even organize interviews ahead. And they also check their profile to know what they are following. Adaptation, just transition, is always loud and clear on their profile. LinkedIn is always there. So social media is your friend. NGOs, CSOs are your friends. I've said that before. They are always maybe like media huddles where they tell you a lot of things happens outside. right? Protests, you can even cover the protests, the media huddles, the interviews, you can get it from them. So these guys are your friends as well. And there's something that Abdul Karim said when he was presenting about the corridor, right? You should be hanging around those corridors, the negotiation corridors, because we're not able to get into them. Your badge can't let you into some of the plenaries and negotiation rooms. So you just hang around. The moment they finish, you grab them and ask them, what has happened? What did they say? What's happening inside there? Those places are your friends. And if you're lucky, there are some events that are not even open to journalists. Like, for example, in COP27, there was this event where African leaders were going to be there, Ghana, Tanzania, Senegal, Okonjo-Iweala, WTO. It was a trade related event. And so I was just hanging around there because normally you just go and be waiting when the leaders come out to rush them. Even Nigeria was there, but it was our then Minister of Environment that was there. And so I was just hanging around there. I don't know. I just walked up to the lady. I asked, how can I get in? She was just nice. She gave me the tag. Normally, those events, they don't let anybody enter because world leaders are there. And, so I don't know. She was just nice and she gave me the card and I entered. And we were able to report that story. We got pictures. At the time I was with the cable. We got pictures and we did that story. I think it was, I don't know if any other Nigerian media got that story. So sometimes if you're hanging around these corridors, you can easily grab them or even get access to enter inside when whenever possible, when the opportunity presents itself. So be wary of old pledges package that's new. There are things that happen at these conferences. Developed countries come and then they start announcing money. Sometimes those monies are not new. And I really want you to be careful of these pledges. Like, for example, there's a global gateway initiative of the European Union. It's about, for them to mobilize about 300 billion to help developing countries build infrastructure and things like that, build resilience against climate change, protect their forests. Even at the Africa Climate Summit, the AU rep still said that global gateway. But if you're not careful and attentive, if you've not been following, you can go to COP and they will say, the European Union is giving $300 billion for the global gateway. You will go and report it as new, that the European Union has given money to do this, to do that. Meanwhile, it's something that has been happening for a while. So sometimes they are not giving you new money. They are just repackaging it, making it sweet so that people will think that, oh, they are doing something. So you have to be very, very, listen attentively and know what monies are actually being put on the table. Be attentive to what role your country is playing. I mentioned the Nigeria pavilion. You have to be attentive. What is Nigeria doing? The country's NDC is out. I don't know if you guys have it, but I can send it in the chat. The country has said, oh, it's going to achieve, it's going to reduce emissions by 29% by 2030 and 32% by 2035. Some of those things, they say they want to reduce deforestation, 60% reduction in deforestation. They say they want to reduce 30% use of generators. Some of these things are numbers. You should also hold KIND and Data Fight Foundation. They should help you get into the numbers. What does it mean? Break it down for us. How do we assess these things? How do we follow it? It's good that they are here to help you. So all of those things are very important. I'm going to just drop Nigeria's NDC in the chat so that you can follow. You can follow, read, understand, and hold the government accountable. Yeah, global commitments against local action. Yeah, what are they doing? What have they said they will do, and what are they doing? So know what is important for your region, Africa. Adaptation is important for Africa. Africa keeps saying that, currently the conversations around adaptation finance, the doubling of the finance from 2019 levels. So at 2019, they were giving about 18 to 20 million, and then they said, okay, let's double it to by 2025. They were supposed to give 40 million by 2025. Right? Now they are still on the conversation. Has it been doubled? Have they gotten to that? But that's still a far cry from the about 200 to 300 billion that developing countries need to be able to adapt to climate change. So these are some of the conversations. OECD does very good analysis of getting into the numbers, understanding 1.3 trillion, and some of those things, $100 billion, has it been met? Adaptation, all of those things, you can follow them to understand the numbers. Also, Data Fight is here for you to understand the numbers better. Yeah, people should work with them. Then Listen out for new initiatives that are being launched in these conferences, plenty initiatives. And at the end of the day, sometimes some of them get to the backbone and they disappear into thin air. We don't hear anything about them anymore. They don't tell us anything. They just disappear, right? So you have to know, like now at COP27, it was Africa, the different initiatives. You hear Africa Carbon Markets Initiative. At Dubai, it was tripling renewable energy pledge. Countries signed up to it. There was also even the one on nuclear energy pledge, tripling nuclear energy by 2050. People signed up to it. Tripling renewable energy pledge by 2030. Countries signed up to it. Now, in COP30, we're going to be hearing something like, what do they call it? Tropical Forest Forever Facility. That's what I put in the slide, TFFF. Now, they're looking for money so that they can give forest-rich countries to preserve their forests. So all of these initiatives keep coming out. There are even initiatives that have gone under the radar. There was something called the Great Blue Wall that they were supposed to do with some Eastern African countries, Kenya and the rest. And that one, I asked a Kenyan representative at Africa Climate Summit, and she said, please, I should not ask her that there hasn't been any progress with it. This is something that was agreed at, I think, COP26 or so. Now it's gone under. Nobody's talking about it anymore. You know, tripling renewable energy pledge. How is that going? Africa only attracts 2% of global investments in renewable energy. But you guys want us to triple renewable energy. So how do we do that? How do we move from these dirty fuels to cleaner fuels, to cleaner energy, right? So some of these things, you have to weigh them against what have they said they will do and how are we meeting that? Because 2030 is just around the corner, and tripling renewable energy has to be for the whole world. So where exactly are we with that? So you have to follow up. You have to ask questions. Africa Carbon Market Initiative, Nigeria signed up to it. Tripling renewable energy, Nigeria signed up to it. You have to ask questions. You have to follow through what's happening. You know, all of these tips. Of course, DataFight is going to share this slide with you. Also, what's happening with your country, Namibia, in last year was using COP29 to push for oil and gas investments at their pavilion. So some of these things happen even at the conference and people don't know about it, right? So when you see some of those things, you take it up. Those are stories that you have to, report on. Just a bonus. I've been talking for a long time, I'm so sorry. The bonus, walk up to people, ask to them, ask them questions, organize to reply. But the good part, most times they are willing to reply. They are willing to. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can,
Can
but
you
it
hear?
seems your network is really bad. It just went bad. Are you back to us? Your network just went bad, and okay, you're still on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, muted, Vivian.
Sorry, at what point did you lose me? I had to go check.
No,
It
I
was my
think
network.
we ended everything. So you were just saying the last bonus point,
Okay.
where you said we should, I think it was networking you were trying to point out, if I'm, yeah,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
was where we just missed.
Yeah, so I was just trying to say, journalists, don't be scared to walk up to anybody and ask questions and crash their DMs. Even on social media, they are ready to talk to you. Crash their DMs, walk up to them, don't be afraid, because at the end of the day, you are the media and you should know the power that you wield. Media equals public, right? They have something to say, and so they have to say it to you. If they don't say it to you, the public doesn't hear about it. So please know the power that you have as a journalist. Walk up to them, talk to them, ask questions, follow one thing at a time. Don't try to cover everything. Get yourself acquainted with all of these technical jargons and look for the best way to simplify it for your audiences. And I'm sure you're going to have a very great corp reporting experience. And one thing I'm going to also encourage you is to follow us, follow and subscribe to Climate Home News. We used to be free for the past 15 years. We were free, going to these conferences, reporting it and giving free information. But so far, with the change in the global landscape, we've started a subscription model sometime this month, earlier this month. But yet, there is still some free content for you if you register to the site. You just have to register, and there's some free content for you to read. Sometimes weekly free. Once that week passes, you miss that story, so you have to follow up with us. And there's also some discounts for people from the global south like us. You can reach out, email member@climatehomenews.com, and you get a discount to be able to read our content. And I promise you, if you really are interested in climate change reporting, Climate Home News is a place to be for you to understand, because we break it down to the list, terms for you to understand how to report and stay ahead of the curve, understand climate negotiations, and report COP30 like a pro. Happy reporting, and thank you so much for having me. Questions?
Well, thank you very, very much, Vivian. I'm really happy. Thank you, Happy Karim, who also still on the call. I guess for me, it really has been like a wow experience, that is understanding how one can get into several conversations and try to still stay afloat with everything. Maybe just to lay a soft ground landing is how we, as journalists, and which is one of the things I liked what both of you have done, is how we can pre-prepare, report when we are on ground, and also do a post report on it. So maybe one question I'll probably like to ask while I yield to any other person that probably have a question, that can maybe raise up your hand quickly, so that we can see how we can round up in the next 10, 15 minutes, is for investigative journalists. What does COP means to them? I say this because sometimes a lot of people are just, especially people who are coming into climate change, are used to seeing, I just used to getting funders to do their reports and they just bounce out. So for them, it's just, oh, there's a grant somewhere, and they just pitch a climate change story, and the climate change story really is just driven by the outcome of an event, not because they have an interest in the field, right? And I believe you both understand what I'm saying. So we have people that just report from the context of events that has happened, and not because they have an interest in the field, right? So I'll probably throw this question to two of you, and if you could just answer 1 minute, what would you say COP is like, or the outlook of COP is like, for the benefit of investigative journalists? I say this a lot because even while, as a person, I teach data journalism a lot. I tell people sometimes you cannot just pick a number because it was just reported somewhere and just put inside your report. You don't even know the methodology behind it. But because the number resonates, or the figure resonates with whatsoever story you're trying to tell, you just fix it in, and that's all. Right. So for investigative journalists, what will COP mean to them? How does that probably help them craft better investigative piece, and probably change in narration, especially for the local context in Nigeria? Maybe I should do Abdul Karim first, then Vivian does rounds.
Thank you so much, Thank you so much, Kehinde. I mean, I don't know. I have, I think, less than 5 minutes to log out of this call. If I can just take any question related to me, please. I would just like to touch on them quickly before leaving. My attention is being drawn to something else, and I just have to leave now. But regarding your question on investigative journalism, what does COP mean for investigative journalism? I don't want us to get confused. Investigative journalism is simply accountability journalism, holding people accountable. And I think myself and Vivian and I, we have emphasized that a lot. The essence of journalism, as a journalist, is to bring people who are representing us, people in public offices, and all of that accountable. So when you go to COP, you see several pledges being made. In fact, in my own country, in our own country, Nigeria, you see there are things that people could easily launch here in Nigeria, and they will just feel like, okay, because of all of that, they take you to COP and say, oh, they have launched this, that. Let me give you an example. I know sometimes in was it not in yes, at COP27 in Egypt, Sunday Dare, who is now the SA to the president, was like, please, can you hear me? If you can hear me, can you let me know.
Yes.
Okay, great. Like, he launched a project they call Project 250K. And in that project, then, during his speech at the Nigerian Pavilion, he was like, he will mobilize, then he was the minister for the youth and sports under former President Muhammadu Buhari. And it was like, okay, under that project, he will mobilize 250,000 youths across the country to at least plant a tree each, and they will be giving them stipend. Because the irony is that you see many governments announcing that they are going to plant 50,000, 50 million trees and all of that. It is not just about planting the trees. It is about nurturing those trees to grow and be able to withstand any weather condition. That is when you say you have planted trees. So most times you get announcement that, okay, we are planting 2 million, 500 million numbers of trees. But do we report it, we run with it, but do we go back to check how many of those trees were properly nurtured? How many of them survived? How many of them are benefiting the communities where those projects were implemented? So you watch out for some of these launches, some of these pledges and all of that. Then back home, your own responsibility is to see if these were fulfilled. Were there money voted for some of these projects? Were they implemented? Hold those responsible accountable. So for me, after he announced that, I monitored it until the next call, because he said he's going to do it immediately he gets back. Trust me, it never happened. And the next call, I knew he would be coming. I had to do the story that they failed in that regard. Also, you remember there was a time former late President Muhammadu Buhari was saying that Nigeria has been able to use funds from the green bond to forest over 6 million hectares of farmland or areas, in the country. I try to put a face to that. What does it mean? It means that we have been able to forest at least an area of land that is as big as Niger State, which is the biggest state, with the largest landmass in Nigeria. I had to look into the Green Bond project and look at the policy draft. What are the projects and all of it? It takes a whole lot of work, and then travel to some of the places where this project, they claim in quote, has been implemented through proceeds from the Green Bond. So that is accountability journalism. You follow the money, you follow the project, you track it from the announcement that these government officials and all of that claim, or made at the respective COP event. So that is, for me, that is what it means for investigative journalism. It gives you a sense of, oh, Nigeria has done this. Can we look into it? What are the figures? Did they actually do it? So on the other hand, if they've been able to do it, can you do a solutions journalism? So that other countries, other people can learn that, oh, through this, and this, Nigeria has been able to fulfill this and this and this and that. So I believe with that viewpoint of mine, you actually got what it means for you as an investigator. So you see situation where many journalists, you go to court and you are more like a PR. You are doing as a PR agent for government officials. It makes absolute no sense. Yes, get the information. But then when you are reporting on their press releases, it is important for you to add relevant context and just put it the way it is. Don't deodorize it. Put it the way it is. If they say they have launched project to plant trees, we have a precedent where they say they are planting trees and it failed woefully. That is simply because some of the things they ought to have maybe put in place at the respective tree planting or whatever project site were not done. So but when you want to hold people to account, you must do that with facts. You must make it evidence-based. So I think that's what I have on what Kehinde asked. Please, I don't know if there's any question. I would just like to take it and take my leave.
No,
Otherwise,
there isn't, and yes, sir, you can take your leave already. I think we're going to also be rounding up. Let me just take Vivian's thoughts and we'll just round up from there. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdulkarim Majid. Okay, Adam
thank you. I
Ali,
appreciate that.
okay, I'll give you a minute to ask while Vivian just takes her thoughts. I'll give you a minute to ask a question. Okay, is Vivian still on the call? Or Adam Ali, you can go.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I thought
Okay,
you wanted
Vivian.
me to ask. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Kendi. I would say if you ask me that question, I'm going to throw it back to you, Kendi, because you're a data journalist and you're very good at this. And you recently had this session where you were taking journalists through the budget. So in that session, you even had places where you saw monies that were allocated to the NCCC to do this, or to some state governments to do this and that on climate change, resilience, adaptation. Those are places you need to be looking at as well, right? Countries get back home and then they say, oh, we're going to use this money to do this. They'll put in their budget that, oh, climate change this, climate change that. Look at your country's budget, see what they've said, oh, they're going to do, and go back to the communities and check if they're actually doing what they said they're going to do. So I think it's good that Data Fight has this academy that really helps journalists to get into the numbers, because following the money is very important. You have to know what has been pledged, what has been given, what has been what they are currently implementing, and how that is going. Because these are some of the sometimes when people don't understand what's happening with conversations and negotiations, these are some of the leeways that government can use to siphon money. So you have to follow the money. And in COPs, talking about climate finance, sometimes you see in climate finance talks, there's also the carbon market talks. So sometimes companies, or even what carbon market does is, I can be a company and I would say, okay, since Kehinde has his forest in place, I can be emitting, and then I can buy some credits from Kehinde to say, when I'm emitting, Kehinde's forest is taking the emission. So now most companies, like even Shell, has been buying credits in countries. For example, there was this story we did in China about a rice farm. I'm going to send the link in the chat. So, but when we went and we looked, my colleague found out that those were sham credits, because those rice farms weren't, the integrity was being questioned, and even Shell had pulled out of the project. But yet, when it was reporting, it reported that it's selling emissions-free gas. So normally they use those credits that they buy to say, okay, we're doing this because we have already offset our credits, our emissions somewhere else. So some of those things are things you have to start looking at. Organizations like Vera They are the ones that monitor carbon credits, even the ones in Africa. If you go to their website, you can look through some of their resources and see even projects in Africa and even in Kenya. There are Kenyans have been fighting, civil society have been fighting against carbon credits in Kenya, because sometimes you go to the communities and you see that they're not doing what they say they are going to do. They can say, oh, we'll give clean cooking option to this community. That means as they are now cooking clean, our emissions are being reduced. So, but those are all lies. So you have to follow through what's actually happening. This TFFF that is about to come through, Nigeria hasn't signed up yet, but you have to keep your ears down to know when Nigeria signs up. And if it gets any funding from that Tropical Forest Forever facility, you follow up and see how is the country going to enforce this, because they've said they want to reduce deforestation on 60%. Meanwhile, if you go to Global Forest Watch, you see how much deforestation goes on in Nigeria. So you have to hold the government accountable as an investigative journalist. Also, Nigeria became a part of Beyond Oil and Gas. They are called BOGA. At Africa Climate Summit, they said, oh, we'll become part of BOGA. And recently, just last week, BOGA is going to give Nigeria $800,000 to be able to transition it away from gas and oil. But do you know what is in our NDC? Our NDC says we are going to use gas as our transition oil, as our transition fuel. So you have to be asking questions. Nigeria is signing up to Beyond Oil and Gas. They are getting funding. But in their NDC, they are saying they are going to use gas as a transition fuel. So these are things you have to start looking at. What are they going to use this $800,000 to do? How do they want to achieve that? What are they going to do? Like, it's crazy. So some of those numbers, look into them, look at how much money has come out, and then you look for, there's this thing around critical minerals. People are always talking about critical minerals, that, but we are beginning to see the same things that happened with the oil and gas era repeating itself in this clean energy era. So you start asking yourself, what exactly are we doing here? How do we ensure that this transition is clean? These are areas you have to start looking at. What are the resources that Nigeria has? I heard Nigeria has nickel, Nigeria has lithium, Nigeria has some of the critical minerals we need. Some African countries as well have these critical minerals. You have to start asking yourself, how are they ensuring that these processes are clean? I did a story on it recently that we published from what's happening with the processing plant in Kaduna. So you see projects coming in, mining resources going out. You have to ask yourself, are these really adding value to Nigeria? Are we really moving ourselves away from the oil cost to a cleaner energy that is going to help our people and give us value? So things like that, these are stories that you have to start looking at, commitments that you have to start looking at. And yeah, I'm sure you have lots and lots of stories to tell.
Thank you very much. Adam Ali, you can just ask a question as we begin to wrap up. We can hear you. You're muted already. I'm trying to unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. There's an ongoing project, an ongoing initiative from the current administration, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So a kind of net fund. So those net fund distributed to students. Some students have received, some students are receiving it, but at the other hand, some students were not able to get the net fund. Even the net fund is of two stage. There's one called upkeep, and there's one there's one for the school fee that the government are paying for the student. So, but students, there's a certain okay. Now, for me, for example, I applied for it, and I applied for the next fund in 2023-2024 academic session. So, when I applied for it, so the next one, the next one paid for my school fee. After which I've already paid for the school fee. So the school has to refund my money, my money then. But unfortunately, till now I'm staying. The school have not.
So I'm not really sure that it really headed the way we want to ask. But yeah, I probably just want to use this medium to thank Vivian, and I know Abikarim had gone already. giving us the privilege to have to talk about it. Just know that all of what you've said are going to be uploaded online, and all our you would probably by Monday, Tuesday, you already find us putting this on our YouTube channel. So yes, you can follow us on YouTube, Data Fight Academy, where we try to put the recordings out. I believe that monitoring COP conversations and negotiations is one of the things that equips you as journalists, especially for big journalists who has to write. And one sensitive point I saw Abdulkarim make was how we don't report from the PR perspective, right? What we want to do is how we can localize everything. So you're getting conversations, but beyond those getting conversations, you're trying to make sure you align those conversations straight up with what's the local context of what is happening. So there's a lot that I can probably talk about, and I want to say that we're looking forward to having a lot of climate change related projects and related conversations over time in the academy, and you can also be part of it. Subscribe and follow us in every way you can, and you get in touch with everything we do. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Please feel free to subscribe, and we see that you can follow us on past recordings and past teachings and several analyses that we have done. We'll call it a day, until we see you for another episode next month. Bye-bye.